Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sippin' on Stories podcast. I am so delighted that you're here. I am Mandy Corey, and I am your host. Welcome to episode number 1. You guys, I am so excited to finally be launching this podcast. I have wanted to do a podcast like this for literally years. I have been in the depths of motherhood with 4 very young kids, and that has kept me very busy. But all along in the back of my mind, I knew that I wanted to start a podcast like this. I really find the joy in learning about other people and hearing their stories. Let's just say no detail is too much detail. There is no such thing as TMI. I want to know it all. And I truly find so much happiness in hearing people's stories. People will talk to me and be like, I'm sorry, I rambled on so much about that, or you probably didn't want to know about that. And I always do. Even if it is about somebody that I do not know, I am fully invested. Once again, I'm so happy to be starting this. I'm a little bit nervous just because what if nobody wants to tell me their stories? I don't know. I hope that they do, but time will tell. Also, it is a little bit vulnerable to put yourself out there and start something like this and possibly have people watch you fail, and that's scary, but I decided it was worth it. Even if I only get to talk to a few people, it's worth it to me. So, I'm glad that you're here for this adventure with me. For this podcast, I want any and all stories. However, with that being said, I'm starting with a story that is very personal and near and dear to my own heart. And it is a chilling story, but that's not to say that that's what I want the entire tone of this podcast to be. I want the happy, I want the sad, I want the messy, the embarrassing, the funny, the exciting, the shocking. Did I already say that? I want it all. These are the things that I want out of this podcast. But this one is going to be a little chilling. This one is sad. And it's personal to me because it did play a role in my life as a child and growing up and continues to do that. So let's jump into our first interview, which happens to be my mom. I roped her in to being my first guest, and I'm so grateful for her. So grab your drink, whatever that may be, and start sipping, because here's your first story. Okay, we have my first guest today, which is somebody very special to me, and it is my mom. I'm so grateful for her for coming and being my guinea pig for this episode on this podcast. And I know that she has some interesting stories. She would tell them to us all the time growing up. So today she's going to share one of them. But before we get into her story, this podcast is called the Sippin' on Stories podcast for a reason. So, Mom, when you have your drink of choice, what are you sipping on?
I really like the mixed soda. So, Diet Sprite, coconut, pineapple, peach, with extra coconut.
Sounds delicious.
It is delicious.
I am just sipping on right now plain Diet Pepsi. So not as fun, but yours sounds a little bit better.
And I never get ice because I don't want to pay for ice. I want to pay for drink.
That is true. We grew up with no ice in our drinks, if we ever got them.
Yes.
We didn't have them growing up very often. So, Mom, what story are you going to share with us today?
Well, I'm going to share a story centers on, I guess, when you were really young, something that happened that was pretty traumatic for the family. And then we found out later more to the story, and so it's just kind of an interesting story.
Okay, well, take it away.
Okay, so we moved to Green River, Wyoming, which is an amazing town. I loved living there. The people are really nice. They were very friendly, sociable. If I could move back, if they could take the wind away, I would move back and go to Green River, Wyoming, because I really liked it there. But while we were there, the kids were pretty young, and We lived in an apartment complex, and on the right side of us was a girl, a young girl, and my girls played with her. And then on the left side of us, there was a young boy, and so my young boys played with him. I don't remember the girl's name, but I remember the boy's name.
It was Allison.
Allison.
Yes.
Oh.
And,
Yes.
and he was actually my age.
Eric?
Yeah.
I thought Eric was Ben's age.
I'm pretty sure he was my age. I mean, obviously, my brother Ben and I, for those listening, we're Irish twins. So we are born less than a year apart. So, I mean, he was still close to him as well.
Okay. Well, because what I was going to say is living in this apartment, being in the middle, the playground equipment, and they had some good playground equipment for this apartment. It was where my back door was. And so the kids, the girl and the boy, Allison and Eric, would always play in our backyard. And I would give them snacks and I would give them little drinks and stuff. And so my house was kind of the central point of them playing. But Ben, my son, can I say names?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Ben and Eric became really, really good friends. And they played a lot together, and he would always come over and play, and we'd be having fun. And one thing that was interesting was as soon as his dad came home, Eric would drop everything. It didn't matter what we were doing, how much fun we were having. Eric would drop everything and run home. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. He was so excited that Daddy was coming home. And we couldn't keep him over playing with us to finish the game or whatever. He just simply would run home. Well, then one day, Eric was playing with us again. We were having fun. And the dad came home and said, okay, come on, Eric, we're going to go out. And Eric didn't want to go. He kept saying, no, please, Daddy, I want to stay. I want to stay and play with my family, you know, Ben and you and everybody. And he actually started crying. He really, really didn't want to go with his dad. And I remember being so surprised by that because it was so irregular of Eric to be like that. Anyway, later that night, I got a phone call from a friend, and she said, hey, I wanted to call to let you know, to give you the news that Eric has passed away, and his mother also. And I wanted to tell you before you found out some other way. And I was just devastated. So what happened was the father, they went to Flaming Gorge, and his story was that Eric was standing on the edge of a 300-foot drop, and his mom was next to him, and Eric was starting to slip, and the mom grabbed for him, and both of them fell off this cliff, and both of them died. And the town just felt horrible. They this poor father is all of a sudden all by himself. Eric had just turned 5. I remember he had had a birthday about a week before, and he had gotten a brand new bicycle that he was trying to learn how to ride. And I ended up going to visit my parents when they had the funeral. It was already arranged. The bus ticket was already purchased. So I wasn't able to go to the funeral, but your dad and you kids went to the funeral.
Yeah, I don't remember that you weren't there. I remember being there. I don't remember you weren't there.
Yeah, I wasn't there. And that's when I first realized the importance of funerals, because I swore I wouldn't have a funeral, that I didn't want people feeling sad and being upset that I was gone. And funerals just didn't have a good vibe with me growing up. But because I didn't go to that funeral, I didn't get any closure, where you guys did. And there was a distinct difference between how you guys reacted afterwards and, my husband. You went on with life. I mean, it was still sad, but all I could do was think about Eric and think of him plunging to his death. And then it also just didn't sit right with me. His story didn't sit right with me. I just kept thinking, if I had just pushed a little bit and said, no, let Eric stay with us and let him play with us, maybe he would still be alive. So
having some guilt or
yeah,
something.
I had guilt. I had the what ifs that plagued me for years, actually. And that's when I learned the importance of funerals, that funerals actually are for people to help them get closure on something that's traumatic in their lives. That's when I first learned that lesson. Well, years passed by, and we moved and noticed a story on the front page of the newspaper was this father. I don't remember his name now, but Eric Duke. Sorry, no, it was Duke. Eric Duke was his name. Anyway, Mr. Duke was in the paper because he was going to court because he had tried to kill his parents unsuccessfully. And I started reading this story thinking, what in the world? Well, it turns out that this Mr. Duke's friend is the one that's pivotal in this story. So let's back up a little bit. I had only met the mother a few times to either talk about Eric or to ask some questions. She was very quiet. She was very to herself. She was always very, very nice and kind. But I didn't know her very well. Anyway, turns out he wanted a divorce, but he didn't want to pay child support. And so in his mind, he wanted to kill Eric so he wouldn't have to pay child support. And he went to his friend who had a criminal background, went to his friend and asked his friend, he said, I want you to do a drive-by shooting for the neighborhood kids, which meant you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of my kids, because everybody played together. He said, I want you to get all the neighborhood kids so it looks random and it doesn't look like Eric was singled out, and just kill them all as they're playing in the playground. And to read that in the newspaper 10 years later, or I don't remember how many years later it was, but to read that, just my heart just stopped. Anyway, his friend said, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, his friend, once he had heard about Eric's and the mother's death, he knew immediately what had happened. Dad had killed them. But because he had that criminal background, he was afraid to go to the police because felt like he didn't have any credibility with the police, and they would not, because the dad really was getting a lot of sympathy from the whole town.
Did you ever talk to him after the fact?
The dad?
Yeah.
I did for just a brief moment because Eric's bike, his new bike, was in my yard. And I didn't know what to do with it because obviously he's not around, but I didn't want to leave it out so it'd be stolen. And so I knocked on the door and I said, here's Eric's bike. What do you want to do with it? And he said, oh, just leave it here by the step. And that's all I talked to him. Mm-hmm. I'd never had any words with him any other time. Anyway, so then what ended up happening was he had used all the insurance money and he's out of money, and he went to his friend again. He said, I want you to kill my parents for the insurance money. And the friend is like, no, I'm not going to do this. And the friend realized if he didn't say something to the police, 2 more people would die. And he didn't want that on his head. And so he went to the police. He told them all about the earlier episode about Eric and the mom and his suspicions, and also told the police that he had come to him to ask him to help him kill his parents. And the police put a wire on him, and he went back to talk to Mr. Duke, and Mr. Duke just fell for everything. He didn't realize his friend was wired up, but he confessed to everything. He confessed to how he was going to try to kill his parents to get the insurance money. And so they went to court and found him guilty. And I'm not sure how long he had to serve in prison. He's probably still in prison for that. And the community was once again shocked, but for a completely different reason. But it was really interesting to have this story. here in
you didn't share the part about how you saw the newspaper article.
Well, it was in the news, and they did it on a 4 newspaper series, so it was a continuation. Like the first day would talk about part of the story, and then the second day the newspaper would pick up the story and tell the next part, and it was a 4-part series of newspapers. I actually called the newspaper and said, hey, we knew this kid. He was my son's best friend. We were there when it happened. Are you interested in hearing our perspective or our side of it? And they never called me back. They didn't care, I guess. But anyway, so now when they play the game 2 Truths and a Lie, one of my truths is that I've had a hit put out on my children.
Yeah.
Because that's what he did. He tried to put a hit out on my kids so that Eric's death would be masked.
Yeah, that is crazy. I know that Ben also likes to use that as his 2 truths and a lie as well.
That he had a hit put on him.
That he's had a hit put out on him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember, you don't have a lot of memories from when you're 5, but that is one that I have, is of the funeral and seeing the small casket. And I just remember it feeling so weird that it was a double funeral. So the mom and the son. And so you saw the big casket, you saw the small casket. And yeah, it's just interesting that I still have I clearly forgot that you weren't there, but I have a memory of being
at the funeral.
At that funeral and watching the casket go by.
Yeah.
It is weird. And also just the shock of when we saw the newspaper and we're like, what is this? This happened hundreds of miles away, and why are we getting the story? It felt destined for us,
right.
It was meant for us, even if I think actually the paper, I don't think the article was written by someone in our town. I think it was sent out to multiple papers, not to everyone. I don't know if everyone got it, but
it's called the Associated Press. They're stories that other newspapers pick up.
Anyway, but it was just cool to have some closure that way, because we never would have known.
Right.
That was back in the day of getting the newspaper.
Right.
We don't get that anymore either.
Right. Right. So just one of the interesting stories of raising kids and things that happen to us, and
you never know who your neighbor is.
Right. And what they're capable of.
Yeah. That is crazy. Well, thank you for sharing your story with me, even though I already know the story. But it's always, interesting to hear the view that you have and what you remember from it, and just like re-listening to that.
Yeah. I wish it hadn't happened.
Of course.
Yeah.
But okay, well, you're my very first guest on my first episode of this podcast.
Thank you. I have the honor.
And we'll probably have multiple episodes with my mom, because I'll rope her into doing some more, I'm sure. And she's got a bunch that she could tell. So even if they're not as sad and intense as this one was. So hopefully we hear more from her.
Okay. Well, I look forward to it.
Okay. Well, love you, Mom.
Love you too.
Well, I hope that I don't actually want to say enjoyed that story just because of what it entailed, but I hope you felt that it was worth a listen. It's definitely something that I think about often, actually, through my life, and it is crazy that something that happened to you when you were only 5 years old can really impact you and make you think about things. And anytime that I am on a hike and I am near a cliff, I think of Eric and I feel for him and his mom, whose name was Leanna, and I think of their families and all the people that are missing them and wish that they could be here. It's crazy to think that Eric would be my age, and who knows what kind of life he would be living right now. He could be like me. He could be married. He could have a family. He could have a full-time job and a career. And his mom, Leanna, could be a grandma taking care of the children for a date night or whatever it may be. And sadly, they do not have that opportunity. And I'm grateful that I do have that opportunity. So thinking about this tragedy that happened to them, to Eric and Leanna, his mother, and their families, it reminds me of how blessed I am and how grateful I am to be here with all the things that I have, my family, my parents, all of my loved ones. And even on a boring day, a frustrating and hard day, that is a day that I get to live. And I am so grateful for that. It is a very sad and heartbreaking, obviously, story. And it is just crazy that that can happen to somebody that literally lives right next door to you. So I do want to clarify that this is not a true crime podcast. There was not researching and, all the stuff that goes into sharing a story like this. It was just based off of the memory that my mom had of the event and what she experienced. So I do just want to say that because I know that there are some details through her story that may or may not actually be factual. I contemplated going through doing the research myself. I have actually done research on the story of Eric and his mom and all the details that went into that, and I did not find some of the specific details that my mom had mentioned. But I figured that that is not what this podcast is. This podcast is for people to come on and share their memory of what happened. I will say there are articles still out there if you look it up for Eric and Leanna Duke, and you can find all of that information. There are documentaries and videos that you can watch that cover that case as well if you feel inclined to fact check for that. But I did just want to say that because, again, just with the nature of what that story was, I don't want it to come across as everything was 100% factual, because there are some things that I'm sure are not, but it's how my mom remembers them. So, on that note, not all stories are going to be like that. So stay tuned for episode number 2. Thank you again for joining me, Mandy Corey, your host of the Sippin' on Stories podcast. See you next week.